I grew up in a kibbutz in Israel, and I was really into sport for many years. I love still basketball, and I did play quite well, I would say. But when I did cello and basketball for about 5 years, and when I entered high school, I kind of had to decide what to go with, because I had training every day and games, and then I had my teacher wanted me to practice more than an hour a day at that stage. And I remember myself sitting in my room at home, my parents' house, and I literally decided to go with the cello because I was not tall enough to play basketball. But of course now I'm 6'5", and if I would know that when I was 15 or 16, I would probably keep the basketball. But I'm a cellist now, and I love sports. I love watching basketball. There's a game tonight I'm going to watch with my son on TV, and this is a great passion. But cello and music is really more than passion. It's religion, I would say. So I'm happy I made that decision.
Yeah, so basketball's loss is our gain.
Sort of, I would say. But as a teacher, I also use a lot of aspects of being an athlete and using the body in a certain way, in a good way, in a positive way. So the physicality of playing music is a big part of what I do, and I think it's a lot due to the fact that I did sport for so long.
Yeah. Well, at 6'5", do you have difficulty playing a regular cello? Do you have to get like a...
No, I play... Actually, the cello I play is quite famous. It's a Pablo Casals cello, and it's a regular size, but the end pin of the cello is quite long.
Yeah.
The problem is not playing the cello. The problem is sitting on a plane and getting to places, and of course being in economy and having the cello next to me. That's not the most comfortable way of traveling, but I've gotten used to that as well.
Right. Being extra tall, you don't have any leg room.
I don't have leg room, so I have to put the cello head down, and I can lean on it, because the cello gets a ticket, of course, when you have an expensive instrument, and then I can put my legs under the cello. So it looks pretty weird, but I get places. I've been in India last week and 2 weeks ago in Russia, and just took a red-eye 2 days ago from Seattle back home to Baltimore. So I'm doing fine.
You're doing okay. You're getting around all right.
Yeah.
You mentioned Pablo Casals, and of course you're playing his cello, which is a remarkable story, how you are sort of continuing to bring his legacy to everyone who hears it. And I know that you were introduced to the music and playing of Pablo Casals when you were quite young. Can you tell us about that? And then also how you gained possession of this particular cello.
Well, yeah, so back to the kibbutz where I grew up. It's a tiny community, a social community in Israel, in the north part of the country, basically agriculture. And when I was 10 years old, in 4th grade, we were kind of forced to pick a musical instrument as part of the education. I'm talking about 6 or 7 kids in a class. And I picked the cello because of a girl who played cello and was older. She was 14 when I was 10, and I was a little bit shy to talk to her. So I figured if I'll play cello like she does, I'll get close to her. And I really thought, okay, then we'll get married. And of course that didn't happen. But that's how I got introduced to a cello. And then my parents, around that time of year, around December, the holiday season in Israel, instead of Christmas, it's Hanukkah, but the same thing. You eat a lot and get presents. So my parents, who are not musicians, they wanted to encourage me, and they went to the next town and to the music store, the only music store in town, and they bought a tape cassette. I'm talking about the 80s, so it's boombox days, and I got this tape cassette as a Hanukkah gift. And on this cassette were short pieces played by Pablo Casals for cello and piano. I didn't know who he was back then. I didn't know what it means to play on a beautiful cello, but I didn't realize that this is very special, and I literally fell in love with that tape cassette. I fell asleep every night with this tape, pressing the button play and waking up in the morning.
Wow.
And that's how I became so attached to cello sound. Now, about 30 years later, I'm playing this cello, which is really closing a circle. I could never even imagine or dream that this will happen one day when I started listening to that tape cassette, which I still have. But this is destiny, and I've worked hard. And about 5 years ago, now being a professor at Johns Hopkins at Peabody Conservatory, I've gotten to know the presenter of WPAS, Washington Performing Arts Society in Washington, who luckily for me is an amateur cellist. His name is Neely Pearl, and I started to teach him cello, because when I met him, I actually played for him, and he said, you play wonderful, but I cannot fill Kennedy Center with you, so I'm going to still get Yo-Yo Ma to play at the Kennedy Center, but how about you starting teaching me cello? So that was a good deal for that beginning. And after a few lessons, he said, I love your playing, but I think you should have a better cello. So why don't I connect you with Mrs. Casals Istomin, who lives in Washington and used to run the Kennedy Center many years ago, and let's see if she can help you. He didn't mean at all by his wildest dreams that she will lend me the cello, the Casals cello, the Goffriller, but he thought that with her connections and her being herself a legend in the music world, that she might be able to help if she would find it appropriate. So he arranged a meeting, and I prepared a whole audition for her. I remember it like it was just yesterday. It was 5 years ago. I came with a pianist to her apartment, which is just next to the Kennedy Center, and I started with Bach suite. I thought that would be appropriate because of Casals' connection to Bach and her connection, of course, being married to him and being his student first. That's how they met, and her being a wonderful cellist herself. So I started with Bach, and after playing the prelude of the first suite, she said, well, Amit, usually when I hear a young artist, I shut my ears off right away. But I didn't do that when you played. And I thought, wow, what a compliment. And I said, thank you, Mrs. Casals. This is a great honor, a great compliment. And she said, would you mind if I give you some comments? And I said, oh, no, please, this would be wonderful. And she literally killed me afterwards. She basically, every single note in the prelude, she said, why do you do this and not this? And why this tempo? And what about expressive intonation? And what about the magical moment? And so on and so on and so on. And to be honest, I was shocked in the beginning, but I was so happy, because being a professor and being on stage now for a few years, I don't usually get those comments.
Yeah.
I'm the one who gives the comments. So it was refreshing for me, and a lot of what she told me are things that I studied with Bernard Greenhouse, who was my great mentor and a student of Pablo Casals. So I felt that connection now from the music aspect comes back to me, and not just by recordings. And it was just amazing. And then she said, well, why don't you play the second movement, the Alamand? And then I played the second movement, same deal, and then the third movement. And then she said, how about some Dvořák concerto? So I played some Dvořák concerto, and then how about Brahms sonata? So we went on through the cello repertoire, and luckily I came prepared.
Right.
And eventually she said, well, let's have a glass of wine. And of course, how could you say no to that?
Right.
So me, as you by now know, being 6'5", and her being, really such a beautiful and amazing lady, but I would say shorter than me. She said, why don't you sit here next to me on the couch? So I did sit next to her, but it's like Goliath, this giant, or Shaquille O'Neal sitting next to a reporter. Yeah. And I did sit next to her, and of course, being scared of her, I was shrinking into the smallest possible way I could. But she said, I really like your playing, and even though the maestro, as she referred to her late husband, was very short, and you are very big, I think you should come and try his cello. Wow. So would you have time in July to come to my New York apartment and try it? And this was in May. My immediate reaction was, of course I have time.
Yeah. What was going through your head when she said that to you? Well,
of course I have time. That's what went through my head. And that was the second chapter in that episode, was to come to New York in July, and I did come with Neely. And again, in my wildest dreams, I didn't think for a moment that cello will end up with me, but I thought this would be a great opportunity, like a dream come true, to see this cello, to touch it, to smell it, to be able to maybe play a few notes on it. I didn't even know if I will play, but just to see that monument and this history in front of me. And of course, it went back to those early days in the kibbutz where I listened to that tape. So I arrived in her apartment, and she sent me straight to that room where the cello was. I opened the case, I took it out. I was shaking, literally, physically, just touching it. And then she sat right in front of me, like 2 feet from me, And she said, well, why don't you play it? And of course, it's out of tune. It hasn't been played for years. Not the best situation, and then you have this legend sitting in front of you, expecting to hear the sound of Casals right away. So it was not the best opportunity to show off a connection or a deep connection to this instrument. But of course, I just went into it. I just jumped into the water and played on it. And it was not easy to play because, as I said, it was not played for many years and needed some kind of attention. But I was in heaven.
Yeah.
I was simply in heaven just to touch it. I could smell, I don't know if it was my imagination or it was real, but I could really smell his pipe. He was known to smoke a pipe while playing the cello. So I was just in heaven. I just missed having my parents there next to me because that would make it even more special. They were far in Israel, but I just was in heaven. And I played some of the Dvořák's second movement, I remember, and she said, well, the maestro would have played it faster. And that didn't make me feel good, but I just kept the dream going and eventually thanked her and left and just couldn't believe it. My wife and kids went to see a Broadway show and we met afterwards and I was smiling like I just met Michael Jordan or something like this.
Yeah.
And that was it. And Neely suggested, he said, for this generation, you better send her a handwritten letter to thank her and not just an email like we do these days. And I did. But then I got an email reply from her for my handwritten letter. And she said, I really enjoyed our meeting and I think you have great potential and I would like to lend you the cello so that you can carry on the legacy but also keep developing as a musician and try to find your own voice through the instrument, which I thought was really special.
Do you think she was on the lookout for somebody to carry on her late husband's legacy?
I'm not sure, because I know that in the 80s, Matt Heimovich played the cello, and I think part of the vision of Pablo Casals was that this cello will not be sold, but will be handed to young artists so they can keep developing, but also sharing the legacy and making sure it's still alive. Mm-hmm. And I think I am the third one who has had the cello. The previous two people had it only for a year at a time. And so I don't think she was actively looking for somebody, but if somebody comes along and has a potential to keep the legacy going, and the legacy is not just to say I play the Casals cello, is to really appreciate the essence of his music making, which is how to make a phrase alive and how to keep, the pedagogy part of music, and not just to play really well and fast and loud the instrument, because that, of course, many people can do and probably better than I do. Yeah. But is to take two notes and to find a way to connect them, to understand the beauty of vibrato, how to connect between notes, how to turn the light on a phrase and to make it alive. And that was his legacy. And I'm really honored that she maybe heard that in my playing and thought that I could keep developing that aspect of music making and making sure to keep it alive with the younger generation and with the public. And that's sort of what I try to do also with this CD, with the Peabody Cello Gang, with my own students.
Yeah. Talk about your work at the Peabody Institute. I mean, did you form the cello gang there, or was it already there when you came? Or?
Oh, no, I formed it from scratch. I mean, when I came there, I was honored to replace the late Stephen Cates, who was a legendary cellist and a teacher. But when I came there, the cello department was not really thriving or big like it is today. And so I started from scratch. I didn't have students at all at the beginning, and now I have a class of 15 students for already 15 years. But when I started to have a good class consistently, year after year, and I've witnessed very amazing students with me, and, by demonstrating to them in lessons and having them play and win competitions, I remember from my days studying with Greenhouse and with Lawrence Lesser at New England Conservatory and with Boris Pergamenchikov in Berlin, so those three giant teachers that I had, I remember that for them to really make a point was to play with us, to take us not on the road like I do now with my students, but to play a concert with us and to make us feel, even just for one piece, equal to them on stage, and to make us feel like real musicians. So we could hear when they create a magical moment and we did not discuss it in the rehearsal, we have to adjust to them. And when we have the melody, oh my God, they accompany us. So they being equal musicians to us. And that was probably the greatest lesson I learned from all three mentors I had. And I remember that with the last one, with Pergamenchiko, when we played together, I've made sort of a deal with myself that if ever I will end up being a teacher, I will make sure that I will take only the ones that are ready, the students that are ready, I want to take them on stage with me and make music with them. So it's not blah, 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 talking and telling them what to do. It's really to make them equal to you and create music with them. And I knew that was the biggest part of me studying with those people, and I felt that if I can share that moment with my students that are basically ready technically, but having to experience that magical aspect of being a performer, I would like to do that. And that's how I started the Cello Gang.
They get a lot of performing experience, obviously.
So part of being in my studio, I mean, of course, if you are a good student, is to wrap it up in the studio where the laboratory is, and we learn how to hold the bow and how to make a phrase, and is to go on stage and to make music together. And that's what this CD is all about, is creating music together with my students and sharing it with the world.
Well, there's not a tremendous amount of repertoire for, say, a cello choir, and you made some of your own arrangements for this.
Yeah, so we have arranged, or I asked some colleagues of mine to arrange, and we've came up, this CD is, we summed up a few years of working with the Cello Gang, and I think the highlight of this CD is a new arrangement of the Arpeggione Sonata, which I love and always wanted to record, and we have arranged it, a friend of mine, Tom Zipovich, and myself, we have arranged it for 4 cellos, so I basically play the main line, which is the same, but then instead of piano part, I have 3 magnificent students of mine playing with me, and it really shed a new light on the piece, and it sounds like a sort of a late Schubert string quartet. And I think that's I feel very proud about it, and about this piece being contributed to the cello world, where I'm hoping that students and cellist colleagues of mine will take it and perform it and find out new voices that we didn't know that exist so much when it's played with piano. Having now on record. So I'm hoping that people will enjoy it, of course, listening to it, but also will take an active part and take this arrangement and play it, because it's really fun to do that.
Is the music being made available, the sheet music?
Yeah, it is available on Tom's website, and of course we can send it to people if they want to play it. But the first thing is to download it from iTunes and to listen to it and like it.
Right. Step one.
Yes, step one is to like it, and I hope they will. And of course the connection to Casals, using the Casals cello, having my students, having a new arrangement, I think it's wrapping up the whole legacy of Pablo Casals of sharing the stage, sharing music with younger generation, and sending it out to the world so it can be played again by other people.
And by extension, they're not only getting, your students are not only getting the performing experience, but also the experience of making a recording, which is...
So this is another great, important part of the Cello Gang, is I want them to experience what I do fully, which means to be a performer, to be a teacher. So when we go on the road and we do outreach, I'm not the one who teaches the cellist. I'm making sure that my students, even if they're freshmen, it doesn't matter what degree they're in, they have a say in that masterclass. And I want to see what they do and how they act as a teacher, as teachers as well. And of course, the main part of this CD was to take them and to put them in the studio with me in a very nerve-wracking situation. And I told them beforehand, you're going to hear the sound engineer shouting at me, saying, Amit, it's out of tune, let's do it again, and again, and again. And we spent, 10 hours in the studio recording the Schubert, and they experience a situation where their teacher, which they look up to and think, oh my God, he's so great, is becoming human and makes mistakes and get upset and get tired. And I wanted them to experience that part, because that's part of being a musician. So they get the whole package. They get the getting nervous package part, the being on stage part, sharing music with the public, engaging with the audience, which is another part that is important for me, that they talk to people, the preparation, and maybe the strawberry on top, making the recording and now seeing it out in the world.
Yeah. Well, the only thing you have to do with them now is take them on an airplane.
Well, we've done that, and that's you should have seen 6 or actually 7 cellos and 7 cellists occupying 3 rows on a plane.
Wow.
So quite a scene.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
You should get a picture of that.
I believe me, I will. Our next tour is to Mexico, and we're going to get that photo on social media for sure.
I love the album cover of this new recording with all your students behind you.
Yeah.
Kind of pointing at you with their bows and their end pins like rapiers or something.
Yeah, exactly. I love that photo too.
Yeah, that's great. So also music of David Popper and George Frederick Handel as well.
Yeah, there's Popper and Handel and on this CD, so it's really the entire. It shows everything about cello and about cello choir, about cello music. It has 4 cellos, 2 cellos and piano, and then the Popper is played with 19 cellos and piano, and it's live recording of an encore I did at Peabody with, at that time, 18 of my students. So it's me with 18 students and the pianist playing live. And it's beautiful. I think it's very special recording because it was live, and it was important for me to have that like a sandwich in between the Schubert and the Handel.
Yeah, it's a wonderful program. The Amit Peled Peabody Cello Gang is the name of the recording. It's out now from CTM Classics, and we'll link to that from our website at wgte.org. Thank you for joining us today here on FM 91.
Well, thank you for the interest and for the interview. I really appreciate it.